Jethro Tull, 1974 and Warchild, a period of transition. On the 7th of December 1973, Jethro Tull entered Morgan Studios in London to record tracks for their new album to be called Warchild. An American rock magazine around that time also reported that Tull were recording a classical album with a full orchestra. An album which would have Ian Anderson on flute, Martin Barr on acoustic guitar, John Evan on piano, Jeffrey Hammond on string bass, and Barrymore Barlow on drums and timpani. At the time, I remember being intrigued by this. Tull recording classical style music? A few weeks later, in early January 1974, Tull announced a press conference in Montreux, Switzerland. Terry Ellis, Tull's manager, opened the proceedings by saying, "Since we're here, we thought it'd be a good idea to clear up some confusion surrounding the group since they stopped doing concerts, including that some people thought that maybe they split up. So we thought this would be a good opportunity to demonstrate certainly that they haven't." The band announced that they are working on a Jethro Tull feature film called Warchild. No gigs planned at the moment, but they are certainly not ruled out when work on the film permits. And of the film, Ian Anderson, "We have for at least 2 years been looking for a movie situation that we could use to get into something more subtle than the group can achieve on stage." Ian Anderson: "We are at this moment making 2 albums, one being the soundtrack." When asked further about the film, Ian said this: "The script will be prepared from a story, what we call our synopsis, which I wrote. We have not yet settled on a director, we are still negotiating. It's mainly an artistic negotiation. There are so many directors who are highly praised and well thought of, but I'm not a movie-going person, and we'll have to think very, very carefully about the right person for the film." So over the years, as Tull fans, we've heard a lot about this mythical film, Warchild. So what was it actually about? Well, it's described as a metaphysical black comedy concerning a teenage girl in the afterlife who meets characters based on God, St. Peter and Lucifer. And there were dance sequences in the movie to be choreographed by the ballerina Margot Fonteyn. Leonard Rossiter, who at the time was enjoying fame in the hit TV comedy The Fall and Rise of Reginald Perrin, was being considered to be the lead actor, and Monty Python's John Cleese was penciled in as humour consultant. I kid you not. Having looked at the proposed synopsis of the movie, it's very detailed, very complex and quite obscure. The best way I can sum it up is it's basically passion play, without the hare who lost his spectacles, unfortunately. And if John Cleese has been hired to inject some humour into this, he will be earning every penny of the fee that they will be paying him, or were going to pay him. So after that press conference in Montreux, things went quiet in the world of Jethro Tull until the end of July 1974, when the band announced they would be touring Australia, New Zealand and Japan, a mini tour. My thoughts back then was that they chose to be as far away from the UK and American press as possible, to come back with as little stress and strain as possible, test the waters and most of all have some fun. If you go and listen to some of the bootlegs recorded on that mini tour, it's obvious that Tull were back in top form and having a blast. Those shows back then would start with various pieces from the orchestral music they had recorded for the Warchild soundtrack. That would either be The Beach, the Warchild Waltz or Quartet. Tull played only a few songs from the new album: Skating Away on the Thin Ice of a New Day, Queen and Country and Backdoor Angels, all of which sounded superb. So hopes were high for the new album. And on the 14th of September 1974, we got the news we'd all been waiting for. Ian Anderson gave the go-ahead for a full-scale return to concert appearances for Jethro Tull. Anderson was on his way back to the UK after a 5-week tour of Australia, New Zealand and Japan. The tour had been arranged to allow the group to check out their own feelings about touring again. Anderson said that his mind had been made up to return to live work by the warmth of the audience reaction the group had encountered, and their one excitement at playing live again. Anderson confirmed that Tull will tour Britain and Europe this autumn and America in 1975. He also announced that the album, now a single album, Warchild, would be released on October the 14th, the film and the orchestral soundtrack having been shelved indefinitely. Early in October, the first side of Warchild was played on UK's Radio 1 about 9 p.m. on a Wednesday evening. And 2 weeks later, on a freezing cold Saturday morning, I was standing outside a record shop in Soho, London at 9 a.m. waiting to receive my copy of Warchild. Now, before I go into an in-depth review of that album, there's a couple of things I'd like to say. Now, Ian Anderson has always been a wise observer of what's going on around him, especially in the music world. I think after he'd gone away, rested, relaxed, licked his wounds, and the fallout from Passion Play had settled, he looked around him and thought, I'd given the fans what I felt they wanted. Another progressive rock concept album, and an awesome record at that, and one he felt was the best and most commercial record Tull could have produced at that time. And yes, it had sold pretty well, and the concerts in the main were a massive success. But with all the critical backlash and some of the band finding the material on Passion Play especially too fussy and over-complex, he made the decision to return to shorter, simpler, more rock-orientated songs. If you look at the songs that eventually ended up on the original Warchild album, most of the progressive, how shall we say, complex, difficult songs were left off the album. Anderson opting for a more radio-friendly, commercial sound, but as commercial as Tull will ever get. I don't know how much there was pressure from Ian's record company or whether it's completely Ian's decision, but the band's popularity, album sales, and especially the demand for concert tickets over the next year went through the roof, causing many rock journalists, music papers to grudgingly refer to Tull as now the world's biggest band. Hey, they even had a hit single. Right, let's get on to Warchild, the album. The album opens with air raid sirens, the distant sound of dropping bombs, anti-aircraft fire. The Second World War bombing blitz of England is well underway, which at one point went on for 56 consecutive days. But is Mr. Anderson bothered? Hell no. He refuses another cup of tea and tells us he must go or he will be late for the office. A mournful saxophone and piano leads us in to the title track, Warchild. Here, this is sheer brilliance from Jethro Tull. They managed to capture the authentic musical sound of the 1940s, especially in the tone of Ian's sax, and combine it with 1970s rock. So with one foot in the 1940s and one in the 1970s. The band produced a song, How the Blitz Desensitized People. And with all that death and destruction around you on a daily basis, people somehow had to get on with their lives. Warchild danced the days and danced the nights away. Queen and Country. For this song, Ian delves back into British history and gives us a song about the British Empire, the time when Britain occupied about 23% of the world. Not a great time in our history. Mr. Anderson sings of the sailors who signed their souls away for 5 long years or more in the service of the British Navy, and how the fruits of their labours allowed the aristocracy to have their social whirls. Special mention here that Tull managed to get the accordion onto a rock record. The accordion, one of the most unfashionable instruments, an instrument that the great American guitarist Buck Dahmer gave up at 12 years old because, as he says, it just wasn't cool. And a nod to Dee Palmer for her superb string arrangements throughout the whole record. Next up, The Beautiful and Elegant Ladies, which is basically an Ian Anderson solo piece, with him on acoustic guitar, multi-tracks vocals and overlaid with Ian's flute and sax, accompanied by strings, percussion, and I say beautiful and elegant, but it is actually about a brothel. At 2 minutes 41 seconds, the band join in and we have one of those famous Jethro Tull tempo changes. And we're given a quick blast of a wartime dance band. Tull transform into a wartime dance band. Ian even throwing in a few bars of Auld Lang Syne for good measure. Take a listen to Ian's voice back then. It was at its very best. And there's no studio trickery because he could produce it live just as it sounds on this track. Just as good. Backdoor Angels finally gives Martin Barre a chance to break free and show us what an incredible guitarist he is. After all, it was Aqualung back in 1971 when Martin was given some extended time in a studio setting. Martin takes 2 solos here, both times being led into them by John Evans' synthesizer. While Mr. Barre blasts away, the rest of the band lay down all these fantastic counterpoints. It's heady stuff, and you can see why Tull were held in such high regard as musicians back then. Sea Lion, which is all about the absurdity of life, how we balance our world on the tips of our noses like sea lions with a ball at the carnival. But as you know, the act is wearing thin, the crowd grow uneasy and the boos begin, because it's the same old performance in the same old way. It's the same old story to this passion play. As Bill Shakespeare once said, all the world's a stage. Musically, it's another driving, powerful tour de force by the band, but I have to give a special mention to Barrymore Barlow. Barry is often forgotten when people talk about great drummers, but for me, he's up there with the very best. His playing on the 2 previous Tull albums, Thick as a Brick and Passion Play, was unbelievable. Throughout Warchild though, his ability, his feel, just the sheer invention of the man is awesome. To any aspiring drummer, just go and try and play Sea Lion and you'll see exactly what I mean. Skating away on the thin ice of a new day. Back in the early 1970s, one of the things ecologists were warning about was global cooling. Ian Anderson. This was my first song talking about the issue of ecology, and in this specific case, climate change. Back in those days, scientists believed that we were heading towards a period of global cooling, and that we could be heading towards a new ice age. And in fact, they realised that no, we're heading towards a period of global warming. So my song became kind of redundant, but the idea was sound, and I still have a fondness for it today. Because it's talking about the optimism, about facing a changing world and a changing climate to which we have to adapt, bravely and optimistically, and it feels very apt and appropriate for today. It's a piece rescued from the Chateau Disaster tapes from 1972. It's mostly Ian on acoustic guitar with additional instrumentation from Barry on drums, John on accordion and Martin Barre on glockenspiel. When it was played live on that Warchild tour 1974-1975, we were treated to Jeffrey Hammond playing a 6-string electric guitar. And yes, it was a black and white striped guitar. Bungle in the Jungle. When I first heard this, I wasn't too taken with it. But like all these songs over the 40 odd years I've heard them, they have become old friends, old trusted friends. And when Tull played it live, it was a lot of fun and got us all on our feet. To which Ian expressed some regret, Riley saying, "I thought I was the only person who could ever dance to Jethro Tull." Bungle became a hit single for the band, reaching number 14 in the US singles charts. Many people thought the song's title was a reference to the famous Muhammad Ali-George Foreman boxing match in Zaire, the Rumble in the Jungle, which took place on the 30th of October 1974. Maybe Don King, the famous boxing promoter, took his headline for the bout from Jethro Tull? Who knows? Only Solitaire. Many reviewers at the time perceived this was Ian biting back at the critics after the Passion Play fallout, but in reality the song was another piece rescued from those Chateau disaster tapes from 1972. Only Solitaire features some great acoustic guitar interplay between Ian and Martin Barre on Spanish guitar. And every night his act's the same, and so it must be all a game of chess he's playing. But you're wrong, Steve, you're wrong. You see, it's only Solitaire. So, with 2 songs left, Warchild has been an excellent album. It's those 2 final tracks that I have a problem with. They are okay. But the band had better songs recorded from those sessions earlier in the year. The third Hurrah is an enjoyable romp, but it's really just outtake standard for me. But one note here, the bagpipes on this track are played by a busker who used to play directly outside Ian's record company offices in London's West End. Ian heard him, thought I could use that, and pulled him in to play on this one track. And to finish the album, 2 Fingers. Again, it's an okay track, but the band, to my ears, sound a bit tired and lacking in inspiration. Like I said, they had much better tracks lying there in the can, like Paradise Steakhouse, which is a stunningly original track, bursting with melody and invention. So many unexpected musical twists and turns. No one at that time was making music that sounded anything like this. Saturation is another killer track, as Ian paints a picture of revolution, the have-nots rising up and destroying the houses and towns of the wealthy. The music, one moment creepy and ominous, the next explosive and menacing. Martin Barre ripping out some great guitar playing. Good Godmother. This sounds like a weird hybrid between Passion Play and Warchild, with some very, very obscure lyrics. But just listen to the interplay between the band. How do you rehearse this sort of material? I'd get lost in the first 10 seconds. Listening back to these 3 outtakes, I believe that this is the sort of direction the band would have headed if Passion Play had been more favourably received. Next up, Tomorrow Was Today. Now, a brief snippet of this song was played live by the band back in 1972 as a lead-in to Hymn 43. On the Warchild 40th Anniversary Expanded Edition, we get the full version. To my ears, it would have fitted in perfectly on stand-up. It's just got that sound, and we're also treated to the very, very rare occurrence of Martin Barre playing slide guitar. It's another top-notch song. Great riff, great playing, and a great melody. So it's good night, stay bright. Well, it's good night, don't fight. Well, it's good night, sleep tight. Tomorrow was today. And so to the final track, the amazing Rainbow Blues. This first appeared on MU, The Best of Jethro Tull from 1976. And why, oh why, didn't Ian include this on Warchild? For me, it's one of the great Tull songs. Sweeping, powerful and utterly majestic. Back in the day, Warchild received mixed reviews. Some saying it was a return to form, others saying it was just the same old Tull, just dressed up differently. Some even, believe it or not, criticised Ian for stepping away from the longer pieces of music, the more complex pieces. But no one could argue with the sheer brilliance of Tull's concert performances. Or could they? Rolling Stone magazine. Ian Anderson, the guru and master musician behind Jethro Tull, had a good thing going. Ian would play the Pied Piper with his flute, dance about and dangle a leg, while his band ambled through snatches of convoluted but impressive jazz rock jamming. Jethro Tull, which had begun life modestly as a group specialising in fluted pop with some classical pizzazz, became instead a didactic warhorse, the vehicle for Ian's obtuse sermons, a launching pad for ambitious messes of noodling, like last year's Passion Play. Such stuff didn't sell well. Even avid fans found a Passion Play boring. To recoup his losses, Anderson has now returned with Warchild, an album of relatively brief songs, some of them within the 4-minute mark. Each handcrafted track comes chock full of schmaltz, strings, tutti-frutti sound effects and flute toots to boot, not to mention Anderson's warbling lyricism. British audiences have long had the good taste to avoid such pablum. Really? Every concert was sold out. But I'll read on. Hopefully, American audiences, hipped by a Passion Play, will follow suit. Remember, Tull rhymes with dull. Now that was written on the 19th of December 1974. By mid-1975, Jethro Tull were being regarded as the biggest band in the world. So, critics, don't you love them? To be most definitely continued. Thanks for listening. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care and stay safe.